Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to all listeners to this week's episode of Shack Attack. It's been a while, it's been exams. Akil's also not here this evening. He's occupied elsewhere as well as the year comes to a standstill. But the show must go on, as they say. And inshallah, this evening we'll be speaking to Abdullah Peterson about histories in this community, our long-standing history in this country, in various parts of this country, and what that means for young Muslim South Africans who look forward to a future, hoping to take with them values from the past and hopefully stand on the giants of those forgotten heroes, not forgone, hopefully. And if they are forgone, then something needs to be done about that, because I think in many cases that is the case. So once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we are happy to have you listening this evening. Please share and engage with us on this topic, something that we all have in our families, in our communities, those people that have left something behind of a legacy, not necessarily in wealth, but in values, in what they've done, the lives they've led, and how we can actually benefit from their stories. Abdullah Peterson is a student at UCT studying environmental science and Arabic, as well as media, and is using all three of those channels to delve into the community's large, long-standing history, from those forgotten, buried beneath the ground, studying their mesangs or tombstones, and to those who are not that forgotten, but certainly those of whom certain dusts need to be just shaken off of their legacy, so we can start to understand exactly who they are, where they came from. And each of you can relate to that, irrespective of where you come from. So we're going to be speaking to him about this genealogy, about cemeteries, and about the community's history and how we can forward that legacy, irrespective of where you come from. So, yes, Abdullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Salam Media this evening.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure. We are happy to have you. We're not social distancing. We do apologize for that, but it's circumstantial. And it's second wave of coronavirus. And during the lockdown, many families were on WhatsApp engaging with one another, discussing things that maybe they didn't have time for before. I found myself in that position as well. Adudayan helping me discover certain things of my own family's history as well in the Western Cape, in Paarl particularly, delving into the online archives, which are available, and we'll speak to that a bit later. But it's a challenge to each and every one of you listening to go out there and delve into your own family histories and legacies and find out what is it out there that you can maybe learn from, that you can repeat and maybe not repeat. As we know, there are always things that we find that are untoward. That is the nature of human beings' lives. We are fallible. So, Abdullah, I wanted to know from you, first of all, in Islam, we taught, of course, to establish family ties and foster family ties. And what I wanted to ask you really was whether that inspires you when you delve into your own family's history. Genealogy being something of a sunnah, that is how we know so far deep into the prophetic family prior to his birth, and how we come to know of those who came afterwards. It's through genealogy. And how do you apply that in your daily life today?
Well, I mean, definitely that is an influence. You see, the Prophet, he spoke about something called Silatul Rahim, which is the ties of the womb. And that literally refers to, your family ties and your, at the time, I suppose you would call it pedigree, your ancestry and so on. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr, who was one of the Khalifas of the Prophet, he was the pedigree artist of the time, if you would put it, the genealogist of his time. He could tell how any person in the entire Quraysh and the entire Bani Adnan were related. So, I mean, definitely that is an influence. But for me also, I was raised by my great-grandparents, and I grew up listening to all these stories of the Boerkaap and Kimberley, Vryburg, Vitas, Vreedorp, and Joburg, all these places. And, once I got to around 13 years old, I started to question, who is there any truth to all these stories? Who are these people that I keep hearing about? Who is this Hatta van Loudestraat and Imam Kiamdin from Paul and Vet Pangria from Pitas, for example? So, and this is now what spurred me to use the archives, utilize it, find documents and death notices, all these things. And I started contacting other Cape researchers or South African Muslim researchers, many having roots in Johannesburg, and they recommended some online tools, which is now my main tools that I use for this type of work.
So if it's online, that means we can all do it from the comfort of our homes with the right advice, which hopefully you'll give us. But I think the history of the Cape is quite well documented, if not complete. I doubt it's complete. It's never complete.
Of
But
course.
I think here in Gauteng, where I'm situated right now, a lot of us look and say, what are we not doing to what are we doing and not doing to preserve the history of those before us? And the history is not as old as the Cape, so it should be easy to retrieve. That information, and it's a challenge to those listening as well, wherever you may be, to start asking those questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What has somebody recently come into the deen in my family? What is their origins? If they came from other countries, what were their origins? And the common thread through all this is that each person has a story. And sometimes learning about the people of old will tell you a lot about yourself, certain traits. I was with an uncle of mine one day at a janaza in the Cape, and I saw him asking the family that of the marhum now, who cooked the food, and and so on. And I said, and he was so friendly with them, and called them to his table and asked him all these questions. And I looked at him and I thought, but you remind me a bit of myself. And I thought I was the only one like this, but clearly, and we he's not my mother's brother. He's actually a cousin, so it's not even that closely related. But the more you speak, the more you find people that are like you. I think you learn to appreciate what Allah has given you and your skills, and whether it's sport or whether it's singing or whether it's art or appreciation for mathematics or science or whatever the case may be. It's about tapping into that and finding allies that you can work with in life to further your own journey. So looking in the national environment, and I think that you spend a lot of time in that environment. What Islamic injuncture inspires you towards doing that, and physically, how do you go out and tread the path on this earth, looking to protect it, and also maybe find some funny things in there as well, which you tell us about, I'm sure, in a few minutes.
Yeah, so for me, I'm an environmental science student. I have a passion for the environment and for what they call natural heritage, the heritage of the earth, indigenous herbs, indigenous medicine, indigenous culture, so on. And in the Quran, Allah says, "Wa ibadur rahman yamshawna ala al-ardi hawna," that the servants and the slaves of the most merciful, they tread lightly upon the earth. And if we apply that in the context of sustainability and the environment, we can equate it with your carbon footprint and the footprint that you leave on the earth regarding nature and environmentalism and sustainability. So definitely Islam plays a massive role in all of this. Yeah.
So it's when people speak about carbon footprint, somebody like me, or maybe people in our generation, or even older, would say that's nonsense. We've lived for years this way. The earth will repair itself. And yet the Quran does speak to preserving and looking after what Allah has given us as vicegerents on earth. And so for us to discard it as a modern phenomenon that is something to be cast aside is quite fallacious of us, isn't it?
Of course, of course.
So, what exactly have you done in your time studying and walking around the various places that you've been from the natural perspective, and then later on from the cemetery perspective as well? And what have you found?
Well, from the natural perspective, we came from the earth, we are made of clay, and we will go back into the earth, and we will become fertilizer for the plants and so on. So we are directly linked with the earth. And this the maqbara, the cemetery, is where a lot of these processes take place. And growing up, many of us as Muslims, we spend, or mostly males, we spend quite a bit of time in the cemeteries, burying our loved ones, visiting our loved ones, and so on. For me personally, I used to frequent it with my great grandfather, and after he passed on, I used to frequent it alone. And in Cape Town, we have the Mowbray Maqbara, which is now one of the main cemeteries in Cape Town. And one afternoon, I just sat there and I looked, and I noticed all these tombstones in one section that were all written in Arabic Afrikaans, and the old Javanese Malay language, but using Arabic script. And I never noticed it before, but suddenly I became so interested in, this is rich history right here in our cemeteries that, you know, nobody knew about. Yes, we all knew about the Tanabaru and so on, but I mean, in so many other cemeteries it exists. And we actually went to the nuclear cemetery the other day, which is not that old. I mean, there was a previous one, the Braamfontein
Mm.
one. So the nuclear one is a fairly new one, but as we walked in it, we saw some of these old tombstones with the Arabic and some Gujarati and Urdu and so on. And because of this interest, I started a new hobby of transcribing and translating these tombstones, which is it's kind of a key part of my life at this moment.
It's consuming the life apparently. Abdullayan's dad has a very interesting name for him, so he can tell you what that is in a moment. Please share with us what that nickname is.
Yeah, my dad calls me the grave digger, also the tomb raider.
So yeah, in Afrikaans they say "Munikrap tijikni" or "chukni," and like don't scratch where it doesn't itch, or don't go scratching. Adadayan does the exact opposite of that. He goes exactly where others would rather leave it off. And as we know, the cemetery is home to animals and snakes and scary things as well. But he goes nonetheless, and because of the Arabic language, denoting children as the children of their parents, it tells you a lot more than our current tombstones, where it just mentions the person's name. So, for example, it says Shakil Gadda, but it wouldn't mention my family. But the old gravestones used to tell people their family origins. It would even tell them where they came from, maybe the month they arrived in the country or they passed away, and so on. And those things allow descendants of those families to then go and actually delve deeper and find that there's discrepancies in the formal South African records versus what the community then wrote on those Mesango tombstones. I found something similar in my own family, and it's just making me wreck my brain as to what is the real truth, and I hope to find out quite soon. But after Jan, tell us a bit about some interesting tools that you've had to establish or sharpen in your research dealing with people. Some people are very secretive, some people are very scared of sharing, or they're scared that if they share the information, it's going to get destroyed or lost. Photographs, family information. What sort of tools have you learned, interpersonal tools, as well as physical, archival research tools that we can use as people who are interested in researching as well?
Well, for me, the one of the biggest tools is honesty. Just be honest with the people, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. Don't come with any hidden agendas, because people sense that very easily, and they become very hesitant to give up information, show kitabs, and so on. So, I mean, just have integrity, be honest with people about, you are really interested in your heritage, or the shared heritage of our people, and that's your key motivator.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's sometimes a personal thing. Sometimes things that parents have told their children and don't tell anybody, and whatever the case may be. But the reality today is that with many people immigrating overseas, many family lines are ending in that way. And not only that, even photographs are being destroyed. Fires happen, things get lost, and without preserving, there's no story to tell. And one might ask, why do we care about stories? It's old, it's outdated and all that stuff. But I found personally, and I'm sure you agree as a listener, that when you learn about places like Fitas, like the 66, like the Bukab, even parts of PE, Durban, wherever, actually, I'm out of places I actually don't know. There's so many other places I'm
Throughout
not
the
mentioning.
entire South Africa.
Yeah, the entire country.
Yeah.
Um, every human being had a story, every family had a story. Those with our families had stories, because why were they with our families? Certain people failed in their duties to take care of their children, and they left. And of course, they left a big void. But that doesn't mean that those stories aren't worth telling. Now, in the community, in Arabic as well, we speak of asal, or that of purity of your lineage, and certain families having a good asal or good standing in the community and so on. And other people don't have that; they don't have a long standing. People reverted to Islam or moved to the country less, more recently. But that doesn't mean that your story is not worth telling. It's just perhaps maybe a challenge that if your family has a long-standing history in this country, find out more and try and live in that way. Maybe revive certain things that they used to do. But if they didn't, then learn from whatever the little they did do, and let it not be a means of dividing or creating hierarchy amongst us, which it did do in certain instances in our old communities, creating a sort of upper echelon and in the lower echelon of a community without real basis in Islam. What do you say to people who are maybe looking for purpose in life and maybe could find this in these legacies?
Well, look, most Muslim South Africans have roots in South Africa. We have roots in either the Malay community that came here as slaves or political exiles, or in the Indian community that came here as merchants or some as indentured laborers. And there are other Muslim communities around the Cape, around South Africa, sorry. And if we delve into it far enough, eventually we will find a truly inspirational forefather that might just be a guiding light in your life. You might find amazing information about them that it makes you emulate them in a way, and you strive to be similar to how they are, because I mean it's in your blood. It's a forefather of yours. But
Yeah, and I think they like other communities, of course, have many Muslims have become Muslim recently, and others have moved here from all over, places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt, Malawi, Mozambique, and now those stories are yet to be told, yet to be created. And I think the exciting part is what will come of those stories. We don't know. The political climate we live in now, socioeconomically as well, is different to what it was when it was Fitas in District 6, and people living among neighbors, sharing things, and so on. So maybe people will have less of a close knit, and therefore, if your great grandfather is no longer alive, it might be more difficult for you or your child to go find information about him or her from a third party, because people don't know each other as well as they once used to. Whereas Abdulayan is in Johannesburg at the moment, delving into his own family's history and meeting people that knew his forefathers only because they lived that close to one another. And I think it's a lesson for us, to try and establish and keep those family ties, even if it's only through these devices that we call cell phones, Twitter, social media. You've met a few family members through social media, haven't you? And what's that experience been for you, especially in the face of those who speak ill of these platforms, saying that it's a distraction? How have you found it useful to use these tools in meeting up with family and actually doing good things for them?
Well, many of us that grew up with our grandparents and great grandparents, or even our parents, we obviously hear stories, of uncles or aunts or grandparents. They are oral. Almost every family there is some sort of oral history and oral tradition that continues. For me, fortunately, I have my great grandfather that's still alive, my great grandfather's sister, sorry, and I consult her with a lot of family research and things that I can't put together, and I ask her for names that she heard growing up and so on and so forth. And I would combine a lot of it together, and I would just go into Facebook and look. You can search by area or by city. So I would Johannesburg. I heard okay, there was the Sahabuddin. So let's search there and let's try see which Sahabuddins in Johannesburg or Mala or whatever like that. And eventually, I came across quite a few people that are actually related to me, and this was one of the reasons why I came up to Johannesburg to meet them. And it was so amazing meeting them, because there is so much shared oral history, and there is oral history that our side will have that they don't have, and that they will have that we don't have. So I mean, if you go about this task and you put everything together, you eventually have this. It's a massive story that you can tell about your family.
And
And
you
I
can
mean,
also myth bust,
there are a
as
lot
we
of myth
spoke
busting, because
about recently,
yeah,
the colonial histories that people hold
royalty
on to.
and
Yeah.
Prophet's family, all of this, yeah.
Mm.
But I mean, if at least one person in every family tries to do this, it will encourage more others. But at least there's that one person doing it and keeping
Yeah.
it for the next person that's going to come along.
I wouldn't say it's fard kifaya, because it isn't a fard to
Yeah.
know your family necessarily. It is a good thing to do. But if there could be, if you could think of it that way, that you represent your family, you do the research, people are going to be inquisitive eventually, whether it's later in their lives, and they're going to want to know. Especially when families marry. Traditionally the families talk. Oh, where you from? Who's your family? Who's your forefathers? And if they don't know each other, then they want to know each other. And some people use that as a negative thing to say, oh, but if we don't know you, then we can't get married and so on. Other people use it as a matter of inquisitive and interest, and something that they would just like to know about. And this knowledge can come in handy on those musarans or those family
Consisterance.
meetups, yeah, sister runs,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you find, however you find yourself meeting your spouse and so on. But about DNA testing, it's something that is a new phenomenon. People are now using DNA testing to find out the origins, especially families of large mixture. And we must also remember that even people that think that they are only one thing for generations, even those ethnicities had origins. People had been migrating and immigrating for centuries. What do you say about DNA testing, and has it been an interesting experience for you, and would you encourage it? And how can we roll this out in our communities to actually tell us something about where we all come from as a collective?
Look, there are obviously pros and cons to DNA testing. There is the chance of your DNA just being around on the internet for people to utilize, or the government use. There's a whole lot of conspiracy theories, and there's some truth to it as well. But the pros to DNA testing, it's it's more for people that are inclined to knowing about their family and so on and so forth. So for me, I did DNA testing, and I matched with a, let's say, fourth or fifth cousin in Johannesburg. And fortunately, because of the genealogical work that I've done, I managed to make the connection.
Mm.
So, coupled with the genealogical, the research side and the DNA side, you can put the two together and expand your tree and your knowledge about your family and where you come from. But with the with the DNA regarding your roots, it can be a bit faulty because nothing can ever be accurate, and
Mm.
only certain people in the family will inherit certain genes.
Mm.
So you would like more people in the family to do it so that you have a broader understanding of it. But for me, I think the ethnicity side of DNA testing, it's more for your own interest. It's not really helpful in the the genealogical side of it.
Mm.
It's more those matches, DNA matches that you match with your distant and close relatives.
And obviously,
That
the
are
more
helpful.
people that do the testing, the more matches
Yeah,
there will be
exactly,
on the
exactly.
network.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think what for me that was interesting is that some of us come from long established Muslim families, and you almost assume that it's been the case for
Forever.
forever.
Yeah.
And Allah says in the Quran that He created us in nations and tribes. And when you do this DNA testing, you realize that nations and tribes run through your veins, and that people crossed over their so-called barriers and so-called prejudices to marry people
And
and
to
found
continue
families.
that verse,
Yes,
Allah says, "Lita'arafu," so
to
that
know
you
one
may know
another.
one another.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
now we
which
don't
is
want to know one
exactly.
another.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
sadly.
I think pre-apartheid, of course, there was slavery and colonialism, but I think people were more willing to intermarry and sort of get to know one another, if you could call it that. Apartheid formalized segregation laws in terms of marriage and so on, and so you find people in very strict boxes. That you either only Indian, or you're only colored, or only Cape Malay, or only African, or only Zulu or Xhosa, whatever the case may be. But that's not necessarily true for first of all, and second of all, it doesn't have to be true for the future, because that isn't those things don't stop us today. Obviously, finding common ground is important, but when you hear the stories of the people of old, they really sacrifice so much to language barriers. I mean, people coming from the Far East, meeting somebody from Europe, and they don't know each other's languages, but somehow they made it work. And I find that quite interesting. I find it's a manifestation of Allah's wisdom and glory. And like they say, when those who've been for Hajj and Umrah, they would find all these nations and tribes gathering around the Kaaba, and that happened already in our small communities. We just weren't present for it, and today, because we're also mixed up and so on, it doesn't look that way, because we all look like one kind of nation. But what else can you tell us about certain things that you found stumbling across cemeteries or even buildings that you visited? The Group Areas Act affected many families, and physical legacies are gone. Like, I can't go to the place where certain people grew up in my family, and I'm sure the same for you. But perhaps maybe driving past there, it kind of tells you a bit about the kind of homes they lived in, how many children were living in those homes, and maybe humbles you as well to know that you maybe blessed with a bit more. If you are, that's how I felt when I drive through Fita sometimes, about looking at the size of the homes and the sheer number of family members. And today we complain when our families are in our rooms for too long, how stubborn we are.
Hmm. Look, regarding visiting your ancestral areas, if you would put it, I personally, I've got some roots in Fitas. I've got roots in Devate in Cape Town. I've got roots in Claremont, in the Kirstenbosch area. And I obviously I drive through these places just to get a glimpse into the lives of my grandparents, great grandparents, so on. See what they actually went through, so that we could be here, so that we have a lekker life, if you would
Mm.
put it. Yeah, and I mean, for example, I I went to visit Constantia once because I have some roots there, and my granny told me in those days there was no cars. It was horse and cart, and the roads weren't, the same like it is today. So I can only imagine what it was like traveling on horse and cart all the way from Constantia to Cape Town
Mm.
just to go see your own family, because the wife was from Constantia and the husband was from Bulgak and so
Mm.
on. So I mean that is one difficulty.
Mm.
Today we just get on a plane and
Mm.
it's so comfortable. The
And
other
even that
thing,
for us is seemingly too much.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is, life was not as easy as it was today. My great grandmother, she told me when she had to go visit her uncle that lived opposite Kirstenbosch. Her father and her brothers would have to go hunting in the forests to find food to eat because there was nothing around. It was that specific section was so isolated that, and if they didn't find anything, then they wouldn't have any food to eat.
I've
So
never
I
heard that
mean,
before actually, because you
yeah,
think, that part of the city today is so developed. People are
exactly.
living there,
Yeah.
but it was a place of hunting and gathering almost,
Exactly. Yeah.
even up to recently.
Yeah.
But the fascinating part for me is that um, we have this notion that if you want to know about these things, you're looking for family. And when I say looking for family, it's said with a very negative connotation that you're going to, disrupt people's
Yeah.
lives. You are interfering. You
Yeah.
are
You want to
bored.
use them because they are in better social circles and so on.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know how true that is for you, but I'm sure you've heard that before. And how do you respond to that?
Look, each to their own. If they have that perception, that's their thing. But I don't have that perception. I can't allow other people to determine what I want to do with my life. But as a response to that, I would say, it's if I have pure intentions and you don't, that's not my fault.
Mm,
What your mentality is, it's your own.
mm. And I think
That's
people
all.
are going to lose out by being that
Yeah,
way. That's my
exactly.
opinion, personally.
You're shooting yourself in the foot by having this closed-minded mindset about this.
So, speaking about indigenous knowledge, we live in a time where globalization is a thing. It's not always a bad thing, but it is predatory in a sense. Epistemologically, we speak about epistemicide, like the death of knowledge. And to what extent do you feel that knowledge has been lost in our communities from a healing perspective, from a Islamic perspective, even the way things are taught and passed over, and how can we decolonize and deglobalize our understanding of knowledge seeking, so that we continue to preserve those forms of learning.
Well, okay, I can only speak in context of my community, the Cape Malay community, and what I know. So, for example, growing up, I was told about the bitter als plant and the olieblaar plant, and how each plant has its own, it has its own properties for healing. And it's not like magic things. It has actual, you would boil it and drink the water, or you'd use the oil and so on. And obviously, our people not coming from Africa, they would come from the east and so on. They obviously mix with the local Khoi people and the Nguni people and so on, and they would teach them. So, in that time, there was definitely an interchange of knowledge between the people. And sadly, when our communities became established and apartheid helped break us up, all of it was just gone
Mm.
somehow. We were taken away from the areas where these plants grew. We couldn't go there. For example, our people, they used to, many of the slaves used to run away and live on the mountain, Stable Mountain, and many of us used to just go there and, how the prophet used to go to his caves. That was our meditation
Mm.
spots. We would go there. We would just spend time in the energy of nature,
Mm.
and this is where we would come across these plants also, and use it in healing ways. The Malays were known as doctors,
Mm.
not doctors as in medical doctors, but doctors as in they knew how the herbs and the indigenous medicine worked. And today, if you can't find any person that has any knowledge about any of these things
Mm.
anymore. Maybe they'll know about also Oli Blaro. You see, I only know about
Yeah,
these
but that's
two.
something that you were
Yeah,
told as well.
but I
Yeah.
mean, there were so many others. I like the great aunt that I spoke about earlier. She was telling me how her grandfather knew how to prepare all these different types of herbs for drinking, and they would recite over it for healing and so on. And today she doesn't know the names of those herbs
Mm.
anymore because she only had limited contact, and I have even less limited contact. So definitely, an entire a huge category of knowledge has just died,
Mm.
and there's no way of reviving.
And all we do
Unfortunately,
is go to the pharmacy and get medicine, and
exactly.
not always good for us
Yeah.
symptomatically, side effects wise and so
So
on.
whatever we have left,
Mm.
we desperately need to grab it
Mm.
with both hands, and just try and salvage whatever is left, or else we will have nothing left
So
anymore.
maybe that's also a challenge to you, family
Yeah.
home remedies. Write them down, codify them, give them to your grandchildren. I know in school we had to teach the class how to do some home remedies, and I took a recipe of druppeltjies, a stomach remedy coming from Paul, and it tasted quite nice. My siblings used to actually ask my mother for it, even if we weren't sick. And today we don't always have a bottle of that on hand because you have to obviously make it and so on. And obviously we go for other medicines and pills and so on, and I don't think it has the same comforting effect either. And that's one example. Maybe there's others that were lost in translation. Family recipes as well forms part of indigenous knowledge. Certain things just aren't as good as they used to be.
Oma's sister recipe.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah, we can always order in Uber Eats and so on, but it's not going to be as, I don't know. There's baraka in the way that people do things. That might be a bias, but I think it's true. But what advice can you give practically now for somebody sitting at home, bored? It's lockdown. It's not lockdown. We're supposed to be locked down. Um, but you want to learn more about your family. You live wherever there's a cemetery nearby. You have a phone. How can you use those two tools to maybe delve further into your family history?
Well, you regarding the cemetery, you can't just start out of nowhere. You can't just if you don't have an idea of what you're trying to do, it's unlikely that you'll find what you're looking for in the cemetery. But with regarding, you having a phone in all this free time, I recommend just phoning whoever is the oldest, and that hasn't got dementia or
Mm,
anything, the oldest person in your family that can still remember. Just give them a call, even if you're not going to ask them questions. Just familiarize yourself with them, become close to them, and so on. And then that's when all these stories start coming out,
mm,
and then you can use those stories to, you can find graves. Perhaps this that person's grave is there, and you can find an Arabic tombstone that you can ask someone to help translate, and it will take you generations back or so on. And then you can use all of that information together. And there's many tools online to teach you how to use the archives
mm.
if you try. It's not
Rocket
rocket
science. Yeah,
science.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite simple if you try. So putting all this together, and like you said, if you have a cell phone, you have data. They a lot of the archival documents are transcribed and loaded online, so
Okay.
it's there for people to use.
Mm.
Just waiting for the people to do
Yeah, and many of those things are not going to be looked at, sadly,
it. Exactly.
but that can change if you and I and the listeners, of course, make it popularly known that those things are at your disposal. So moving forward, the generation to come, looking for purpose in life, I think we did discuss it to an extent, but it's a new age. You find yourself, I think between an old and a new age. How do you navigate that space, and what kind of challenge do you put out to the community out there? In closure, maybe of this discussion regarding genealogy, or regarding cemetery research, history, family research, and indigenous knowledge.
Look, for me, I find it quite difficult because, as a youth, the youth of today are not the best quality. But you also can't, as in the Cape we would say, odorous. You can't have an old person's mindset.
Mm,
We're in a young world. We're in a new and developing world.
mm,
So you have to find your own way to try and bridge the gaps between the two. You have to socialize amongst the youth, but you also have to keep in contact with the elderly, and so that they can teach you the wisdom that they had to go through life. Because yes, it's different times, but the world is still the world. The earth
mm,
is still the earth.
mm,
Life is life. You're born, you get married, you have children, you die.
mm,
So that wisdom will be until Qiyamah
mm.
comes. So regarding that, keep in touch with the elderly and use their wisdom, but also remember you are in a developing world and you need to keep up with the times. So else you're gonna lag behind, and your life won't be productive.
Mm. I think that's
Yeah.
quite true. We can spend many time looking at the archives
Yeah.
and yearning maybe for the time gone. the days of the old Bukwama people and so on. But they were only successful because they lived in the time that they lived in, and to their grandparents, they were also modern. I think that's we need to remember that sometimes that they used hearses. The people before them only carried cattles and maids and so on. They adapted the use of the loudspeaker for adhan. So this phone is not such a fitna because the hearse wasn't a fitna. It was solved the purpose. And what we find around us today isn't what always was there. Those who came before us have witnessed large changes, and some of them don't speak about it. I think we need to, I don't know, entice them with something nice that'll start speaking. But any last words of the Dayan to listeners regarding all the stuff we discussed this evening?
Sure. Let's think now. I look. My advice is just don't forget that you are yourself because of others. This is what Ubuntu is. Ubuntu is I am because of other people, and you can use it in a context of now. I am myself now because of the people around me now, or you can use it in the context of I am who I am today because of those who were there before me. They enabled me to live the life that I have today. And comparatively, we live a very comfortable life compared to before. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is that we have to now think of what we're going to leave for future generations as well. So it's a continuum that we exist on, and our time is now. I think I know there's a concept of that you were born for a reason in this time. Allah didn't make a mistake when Allah's like we say we're born in the wrong era and so on. I think we all think that sometimes, especially people who are interested in history. But no, that this was not by any mistake. Read the society that we live in now and work with it. Use it as a tool to prepare yourself, your family, your community forward for the sake of Allah and for the sake of all that is good. And hopefully, we find ourselves preserving a lot more and not destroying as much as we currently are. Not only by physical destruction, but even by the systems that we subscribe to, and even the nonchalant manner by which we go about life, not really bothering about those people that are laying there forgotten, from who we could really learn a lot from. But I think that's it from us this evening. We thank you for your time, and please share this and let us get involved in this discussion of family research and genealogy, cemetery research. Go and visit your family. It's a reminder of your own demise one day. And I think that brings us closer to Allah as well. There's lots of spiritual benefit in connecting with people and with those who have passed as well. So may Allah bless your journey as well as somebody that would like to travel this path. And I suppose over there, I'm gonna volunteer your services.
I was just about to say, if anybody needs help, I'm sure you can supply my number, email, and all of that.
So yeah, please get in touch with Abdul Peterson. He has roots in the Cape Malay community, but the Cockney community as well. And pretty much because of so many families going out there, he could help pretty much anybody because he knows what he's doing. And maybe he doesn't have to be the only one if others step up to the plate as well. So that's it from us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.